Welcome to Old Path and our study through the Old Testament book of Proverbs. We do this on Mondays, and getting a chance to get kind of towards the end of this book, which this time through has been quite a journey. And it looks, I know I probably said this before, but the books to me now, at this part in my life, it takes quite a while for me to go through the Bible and get back to the same book that I would have taught, especially in the Old Testament. It's a much larger volume than we have in the New Testament. So if we're going to teach systematically through the scriptures, it takes a while till you come back around to it. And the way that we approached it on Sunday mornings was considerably different about 5 years ago when I was in California. And you can go back and see those. I think that they're still available. But anyway, however it is that we come to the books of the Bible that we do, the older that I get, the different that they look to my mind. And I don't know if that's the same with all of you, but this has been a really interesting one to look through this time through. It looks like a different book to me. And that seems to be the case with everything that we go through, all the different books that we are currently studying through. They just look different. And that says just so much about God's word and the depth of it. And I guess the more that we're able to take in, the more that we're able to see. And I guess that's just because you're getting older, that's a good way of putting it. This is year number 40 for me as a believer. So pretty amazing what has taken place over the years. Anyway, we get to Proverbs 24 today, and very briefly, we do have a trip. I know I'm going to keep mentioning this for the next couple of months, so bear with me. We're going to be heading out to Israel in October of this year, 2025, and we leave actually on the 20th of October. So if you'd like information about the trip, we'd love to have you along with us. It's going to be very, very good to get back there after this horrible time of the war that has so affected them, and then getting back onto their feet for tourism, such an important matter. Even now, there's still hostilities that are happening in Gaza and up in a little bit up in the north. Nothing like it was, and people are not having to flee the area. It's nothing like it was even 6 months ago. But anyway, the opportunity to go and see it with our own eyes, we'd love to have you along with us. So you can contact me through the ministry's website, which is oldpaththeology.net. And at the end of our study today, this is something that I don't think I've handled. I might have done maybe one, but looking through the various topics that are of importance to the church, there's one that's more on the political side than what I usually take on, and it is a term that I've heard a lot recently, known as the left-right paradigm, meaning the left and the right side of the political. And I want to kind of jump into that a little bit, because either it's something that is completely dismissed, or it's something that is really kind of pointed to almost to the point of conspiracy. And I think that there's a kind of a middle reaction to it that I'd like to share with you, because it does shape the way that our country interacts, not only among itself, but if such a thing exists, then you would figure that there would be a completely consistent way that we do everything around the country and in the way of things overseas. So I want to kind of jump into that a little bit, because it is something that's a big topic in the prophecy circles especially. And so I'd like to just kind of jump in a little bit. Of course, it's brief. I'm only going to be able to do it in the kind of bite-sized things that we've been doing around here for topics. It's not going to be hours long as some of the things that we see on the topic. So with that being said, I've done it twice now. Proverbs 24. Let's jump on into the text and let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you again for the privilege that it is to come before you, knowing that you would meet us right here, and that for the study of your word, the promise to us is that we could be led in all understanding and truth by the work of the Holy Spirit. And so we depend upon that. We thank you for that promise. We thank you that your word is alive to us today, and we pray that you would give us understanding hearts and minds to take in what we see and what we read and make proper application to our lives. And so we give you all thanks and praise and ask that you'd be glorified. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right. So Proverbs at this point we are getting that kind of consistently the last few of not just one verse at a time, of topic at a time, but sometimes 2 and 3 verses, maybe even more, that are all along the same topic. And even at that, some sections are still kind of carrying on a kind of a global theme that you'll see kind of works its way throughout. You're also going to notice that the things that we're reading here are going to sound kind of reminiscent of some passages that we would be familiar with in the New Testament. So we'll kind of allude to those, at least the thought behind them. If not, like it's not necessarily a verbatim quoting of these things, but you can definitely see the spirit of it. And you can definitely see that the intent behind it is something that's amplified and spoken about in more of a detailed way in the New Testament. And so as we read in verse 20, or chapter 24 rather, the first 2 verses are kind of one block, and it says this: "Now do not be envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking." And so it doesn't take a whole lot for us to picture what's being said here, just reading it in the simple English, but in behind the words there's a little bit more to it. And so it's kind of good to break down what the language actually means here. Translated into English, sometimes it misses the full effect of what we should understand here. So as we read the first verse, "Do not be envious of evil men," and let's remember, it's God who is the one that determines what is good or what is evil, and so it is His standard. Now, the thing that we're not supposed to do is to be envious or to see the things that they have, the things that they do, and look upon them with anything other than we don't want anything to do with being like them. So don't have the distant view of what they do and think, I would be envious, I would like to have what they have. So if it's material things, that's what usually somebody would have envy over, is what do they have in the material sense? The reply from us should be, yeah, but they got that at what cost? And so as far as the evil is concerned, evil is the one that God would determine as being an evil. So the things that they say, the things that they do, maybe how they came upon whatever it is that you might covet or envy them for, that's kind of what's being spoken of here. Nor does it say desire to be with them. Don't company with them. It's not, don't spend your time. Don't look to hang out, if we want to use modern terms. But the idea of being counted among them as though you wanted to be a part of what they're doing. The problem with it is that there's a corruption that follows with that. And in a much larger sense, the idea that we see in the New Testament, where it talks about in 1 Corinthians, where Paul says about, quoting from the Old Testament sense, the same thing of the things that they had done, where the people of Israel were supposed to be called out from among the other people and be separate from them. Paul reemphasizes that to the Corinthians, come out from among them and be separated. We've already seen that a couple of chapters back in Proverbs, that same thing. Here's the same operational truth. Don't have any part with them. Come out from among them. Don't have any part in it. Don't let it start with envy, and certainly don't throw in with them in whatever that they're doing. Because in verse 2, for their heart devises violence. And think about this. This is just, the devising means that there's a deliberation. There's a planning that goes on to it. Now again, evil people doing evil things, sometimes it just happens off the cuff. But the worst of the worst really apply themselves to it. Before they act, they have a whole plan in this. They devise these things. So he says, for their heart, and notice it's not their mind, it's not as much that there is a thought process to it, though that's accompanied with it. It begins with a matter of the heart. There's a disease that takes place there. That's the evil that God's talking about. So it says, for their heart devises violence, and their lips talk of troublemaking. And the troublemaking, that's the idea here is that they would cause misery and sorrow for whoever it is that they're making their plans against. So again, an observation, in this case Solomon speaking to younger men, don't have any part with them, and here's why. Here's what makes them tick. Here's how they operate. And God sees them as evil because of what they do in the production of their evil. And then again, who's the one who influences them to do such things? That all becomes pretty obvious as you read through this, or as we, more than just reading through it, reading through the entirety of the scriptures, you get a pretty good idea what's what, hopefully for ourselves. If we're saved, and if you're listening to this, I would assume that you are, you can look back to the time before you were. And you can see the difference in how you viewed things and how you went about your day-to-day of things. It looks a whole lot different now, I would assume, than what it was beforehand. We're just different. We're not supposed to be who we were before salvation. Verses 3 and 4 go together. It says, through wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding, it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with precious and pleasant riches. So there is the idea of the house as like that legacy, the heritage. The house itself is something that's known even when you're gone. So it's not speaking about the four walls, though it gives that feeling of the four walls where a family is put together. They live within the confines of their home, their house. But if you're saying that you're building a home, it is everything that happens inside of it. It's the family. It's what makes the family tick. It's how they operate. It's what goes on in their lives. It's how they interact with the world around them. All of those things are what your house is known by. Is it honest? Is it peaceable? Is it true? Is it faithful if we're talking about believers? If it's all of those things, then they are established through these different characteristics. So it's by wisdom, a house, and by understanding, it is established. By knowledge, these are all words that have been used consistently through the book of Proverbs. And so wisdom is acting upon solid knowledge. And then, of course, the knowledge and the understanding are those things where God, if he's the originator of them, and he is, when it comes to godly things, God's the originator of them. And if a home, if a family, and the people who head that family up have had their lives invested in godly wisdom, godly knowledge, godly understanding, well, then, of course, it's going to be, as it says here, established. It's going to be fixed in place. So that the three things that we see here, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, they correspond to wisdom builds it, understanding establishes it, and knowledge is what's going to fill it. And the filling is with, this is not supposed to be a material thing. It means that there are all kinds of riches, as it says here, precious and pleasant riches. It says riches, and instantly you might go to material things, and they can be material things, but a house, it would be better for a house to be completely peaceable and honoring of God, devoid of material things, than have material things without the other. Now, the two can coexist, absolutely no question about it. But since we're talking of spiritual matters, the riches here are more looking at the riches of a family that, again, is one that walks by wisdom and understanding and knowledge, and that it has in the inside of this house. What makes this home what it is are these valuable things, these riches. So again, is that measured in material sense, or is it better measured in spiritual sense? Spiritual is obviously what he's talking about here. So verse 5, and then it goes 5 into 6. A wise man is strong, yes, a man of knowledge increases in strength. And so the first question that comes up, is this a physical strength? And again, really thinking about this, most of what we see here in Proverbs is intended to be things of integrity and of morality, of ethical things, and most importantly, of spiritual matter. So the strength here is not speaking of physical strength, though fine, it could have that as accompanied part of it. That's where the word can be used for all of those things. But again, making a spiritual application, it says here, for by wise counsel you will wage your own war, and with a multitude of counselors there is safety. So this could have the application if it was purely simply the idea of amassing to yourself strength through wise counsel, and even if it comes to the point of war, then because you've sought that wise counsel, because you've built your strength by wisdom and all that. Again, this is a king talking to future leaders, nobles, even kings among the recipients are here. But again, if we take the spiritual matter, again, that has a ring of the Ephesians 6, after the whole thing of the putting on the armor of God, because at the end of that, Paul says, and then having done all you can to stand, stand therefore. So that means of all the preparation that has taken place and everything that has made you where you can stand in the defensive, and even if it must be an offensive position, then stand in that place, be at the ready. And so this kind of goes along with that same understanding. So again, it is a wise man is strong, and yes, a man of knowledge increases strength. It can have a military application to this. It can have a warfare, if you will, but more of a spiritual type of thing, just dealing with the day-to-day of things. For by wise counsel you will wage your own war, whether literal or spiritual, but the idea of wise counsel. You seek that stuff out. Might not always be the easiest. And how do we know whether or not what we're getting is good, solid counsel? Clearly, the person who might want to give us counsel as friend to friend, we would hope that we're seeking out friends with biblical counsel. They'll be able to say, if you're looking for my counsel, here's what I would have to say to you. And it would be just kind of peppered with biblical references and biblical understanding and truth rather than just man's wisdom. This seems right to me. Here's the pros and cons. Rather, well, I believe that this is what the Lord would have to do because here's what he says in his word. Or this is what he's done in times past when I faced very similar things. And that's the idea of they would be calling you, commit this to the Lord in prayer. But here's what I would have to say, going through it myself, which I may have done at one time, or however it may be, when that counsel comes. And it says, in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. It doesn't mean that you're looking for like 15 people and get 15 different opinions. You would figure if it's godly counsel, it's going to be very consistent. And if there's a multitude and they're all saying the same thing and they're godly people, do the math. There's probably a very good reason why these godly people have the same counsel. And you don't have the outlier of persons that are saying one thing and others that are saying another. There's just a consistency. So a lot of this is just so practical and common sense. Verse 7, wisdom is too lofty for a fool. So a foolish person who doesn't care about those kind of things never takes in knowledge and understanding and wisdom and all that kind of stuff. They certainly won't apply themselves to it, nor can they even speak about it from personal experience because they avoid it altogether. That's why it says he does not open his mouth in the gate, which is where these things are spoken about. Or people would seek out their counsel or whatever they might have to say, how they could possibly contribute. They have nothing to contribute. And so this is the fool. This is the simple man, the one who doesn't concern himself with such things. Verse 8, he who plots to do evil will be called a schemer. And the schemer would be the one who just kind of thinks through the whole thing. They've got a whole plan behind it. Again, it's already something that we've looked at here where it's not that it just happens quickly. There's a whole thought process behind it. So when we say he who plots to do evil, the plotting helps you to understand. It's a person that doesn't just go out one day and think, I'm going to do this. It's like, well, no, I'm going to do this, but here's my ideas behind it. Here's how I'm going to begin it. Here's what I'm going to do. They're going to even have contingencies if it goes wrong. The people who do it the best, that are really, really good at it, this person will then be called, again, it says here, a schemer. And that's the one who just thinks it through to a logical conclusion. Though evil it may be, still it's very, very well thought out as much as they can do. Now, verse 9. The devising of foolishness is sin, and the scoffer is an abomination to men. This is kind of interesting. The scoffer would be the person that mocks. It's the person who ridicules. And it says here that the scoffer is going to be the abomination to men. And so the idea that these are the same kind of people, this whole thought process that goes behind it, everything that they plan to do, they plan it very thoroughly and they look at it from all the different angles. You would think, boy, wouldn't it be great if they applied that same amount of energy and brain power to doing the right thing. But this is all being spoken about the people who do the wrong thing. Now, again, would this be great counsel to somebody who's in a very powerful position? Yeah. Now, when Solomon's saying this, he's probably watched enough examples of people doing precisely the thing that he's concerned about and wanting to warn about. He's watched it go on. Again, he's watched his father David go through some pretty horrible stuff. And again, oftentimes what David had to experience was kind of self-inflicted for his own foolishness, his own things that he did poorly. So the devising of foolishness, it is sin. And there's a very similar thing that you see in the book of James, where it says at the end of chapter 4, it says that so then, to the person who knows to do right and not do it, to that person it's sin. So if a person knows that it's something that's right, they're going to have to devise a way to do the opposite. And by doing so means that there's an awareness of it. And in acting upon that awareness and doing the opposite, it's a sinful thing. It's something that God would not honor. So again, you can see the principle is easily seen, not only from Solomon's point of view, but from James as well. And read all of chapter 4 of James. You'll see why he comes to that conclusion at the end, because it's a whole bunch of scenarios that he gives about people, what they know what they should do, but they do something totally different. They concoct an alternative to all the different things that he gives as examples. And then at the end of it, he says, and so to the person who knows to do right, but doesn't, there's a deliberation behind that, and God sees it as a sinful act. So it says, again, the devising of foolishness. And the devising, once again, is just that kind of idea of plotting it and putting it in as a plan. So then it says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. And it means the strength of your, probably even here, best understood, that your dependency on God, if it's really weak, when that day of adversity comes, you're going to fail. If it's just in the very earthly sense, you make no preparation for difficult things in difficult times, you do nothing to try to safeguard yourself, you're going to be overcome by those things, and you're going to fail in them. So then verse 11, deliver those who are drawn towards death, and hold back those who stumble to the slaughter. So that the problems that are here, the first part of verse 11, the ones that are drawn to death and the other ones that are stumbling towards the slaughter, this is an appeal to the person reading, if you can do anything to prevent the person from doing it, not just for the day, like, the guy's going to throw himself in a wood chipper, I'm going to stand in his way. We're talking about something beyond that. It's like, explain to them why this is a bad idea, what they're doing. Why don't you find a way to point it out to them and let them know my reason for trying to keep you from this is my concern for you, but giving them an understanding why what their course of action is and why it's leading to the conclusion that it would have otherwise gotten to had you not been able to intervene. So again, we do this with our kids all the time. How many times when our little ones are growing up do we just have that moment of just sheer horror when we see what they could potentially be doing and we intervene? This is the same thing. Just because people are adults, we don't just say, well, they're not kids anymore, I'm not going to get involved. So verse 12 says this, now if you say, surely we did not know this, does he who weighs the hearts consider it? He who keeps your soul, does he not know it? And will he not render to each man according to his deeds? And verse 12, there's a couple of ways that you can look at this, but what seems to fit the context the best, and what we see from other passages like this throughout the Bible. People may think for a moment that there is something that's taken place and they can plead complete ignorance for it. Now, if you're pleading ignorance because you're trying to keep yourself out of trouble, this point is, let's go beyond that. Solomon would be saying, it's God who can see through the whole thing. You can offer up excuses all you want to, but you can't put one over on him. He certainly knows the difference. Also, it could be taken this way too, along the same lines, if it's something that truly genuinely is as the person protests. I had no knowledge of what I was doing. I'm innocent in this, though it was something that I acted upon. I did so in my own ignorance. Well, God knows that too. So for the person to be able to say this, it's a great thing. Surely we did not know. That might be your outward profession. This is what I'm saying. I didn't have any knowledge of it. Great. God knows that whether or not that's true. Because he says, does not he who weighs the heart consider it? Now, he who keeps your soul, does he not know it? He's saying it from a few different ways. Whatever it is that comes out of your mouth as a way of justification, as a way of trying to say your innocence or whatever else, or if you're saying it just for public consumption, knowing full well that what you're saying is not true, but you're trying to get yourself off the hook, the point is you can't hide this from God. He knows the genuineness of the statement. You can say it all that you want to, but if there's no truth to it, God won't let it pass. So this is what, it's pretty brilliant stuff. And I think we also understand, just innately, we know this to be true. It's just kind of great when you see it written out and spelled out. It's like, yeah, you're right. That's a great reminder. It's a good thing. But in the back of our minds, we always know this. There's nothing that we can hide from God. People are very good at pretense. Some people are better at it than others. You can put up, the brave face and make people believe whatever, but God's not fooled by any of these things. So will he not render to each one according to their deeds? And will he not be able to look judiciously and say, what you have done, here's the outcome of it, but I know what the motivation was behind it. You can't hide that from him. Verse 13 and 14. My son, eat honey because it is good, and the honeycomb which is sweet to your taste. It's obvious. these are good things, just so enjoy them, and this is one of those things really cool. I don't know if it's this way. I've never seen it in the States, but we see this in Israel a lot. For breakfast, you can go to some of the hotels that are there, and depending on what they have out for the morning, sometimes you'll be able to get honey directly from a big honeycomb. So the whole thing is there. The honeycomb, the honey that drips off of it. If you want to eat the wax, you can. You can just take the whole thing. It's just sitting there hanging. And for your morning, whatever you're having for food, you'll see a honeycomb with the honey. It's like it got delivered and there it is. It's raw stuff. Oh my gosh, it's so good. Anyway, I'm getting excited. Thinking about going there. So eat the honey because it is good, and the honeycomb which is sweet to your taste. So then shall be the knowledge of wisdom be to your soul. And if you have found it, there is prospect. And the idea of prospect, there's kind of a looking forward, a favorable outcome, the looking forward to the favorable outcome. So it says, and so if you have found it, and that is knowledge, the sweetness, the goodness of knowledge and understanding that God has instructed. So if that's the case, then you have found that there is good prospect, there's a good outcome, and your hope will not be cut off. That which you hope for, God will see to it. Now again, that's because you're setting your mind on godly things and you already know that God's going to honor it. It's going to be usually based upon some promise that you know to be true, that you know that your course of action is something that you find as useful and sweet and good, and you put yourself into that, you know the outcome of what that will be. So what things we can hope for, what we can hope for. Think through yourself on the application side as a believer. What are the things that you might have hopefulness of seeing? What is it that you're looking forward to? What is the hopefulness that you have in any particular thing that God has spoken about, where he has said, I'm going to do X, whatever that is. So whatever it is that he has said he's going to do, then you have that hopefulness. I can't wait for that to be the case. You know that there's always the promise that it's going to come to pass because he's the one who promised it. There's no indecision, there's no doubt about it. So it says in verse 15, now do not lie in wait, O wicked man, against the dwelling of the righteous, and do not plunder his resting place. For a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again, but the wicked will fall by calamity. So the two are related here. The first part is a caution to the person that's wicked. God's the one who's has been able to determine the course of it. Now, he says to them, sitting afar off, they're waiting for the person to fall. The second part of this, you might see him fall and get into trouble. And this isn't speaking of a spiritual falling. It's whatever kind of trouble he may find himself in, just the day-to-day of life. You may find him falling 7 times, and the 7's an arbitrary number. It's meant an indeterminate amount of times. You might find that his day-to-day life has troubles all throughout. But here to the wicked, the caution at the end of this all, he says, the wicked will fall by calamity. And that means kind of come to ruin. That means that when God is going to see to, justice and judgment, all the rest of that, the person that's operated wickedly will have to deal with that consequence, and they're not going to recover from it. But it says even the person who falls 7 times or an indefinite amount, he will always rise again because he's right as far as God is concerned. God will not see him come to destruction. And in the case of the wicked, that's where they're headed to. Now, Solomon, when he says this, can't even think of it in terms like we think of it now. Because, we look at this and think, yeah, but we look around us and wicked people are doing great all the time. They don't have their struggles. They don't have their problems. And yet we look at that and say, yeah, but it's not forever. This world is temporary. So the believer who may not have anything and may have nothing but trouble in this world, we're not here forever. The day's coming when our reward will be in the person of Jesus and what he has secured for us. It's an eternity spent with the one who loves us. The person who may have all the things that is defined here as wicked and may have plenty of earthly things, they're going to have complete ruin in the eternal sense at some point down the road. And that's how we kind of look at those things and think there's the temporary versus the eternal. It makes what Solomon says here that much more like, wow, when you think of it in the eternal sense, it takes on a whole different characteristic. Now, going along with this, verse 17. for the righteous people, the ones who may fall those 7 times. There's a caution to them as well, and to us. Do not rejoice when the enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and is displeased, and it displeases him, and he turn away his wrath from that person, or from him. Now, there's a part of this that I think maybe a little presumptuous if we really get the understanding, even as it's in English here, because I don't see that God acts punitively where he would say, well, this person is getting what they deserve, but because the good person's over there rejoicing, I'm going to quit punishing this person. I'm going to punish you instead with what I was going to do to them. I don't think that's how God operates, even if that's how Solomon looks at it. What we would want to be able to say is, and how we could make this where it would definitely work in ways that we understand. We as the believers would not want to look at those who are evil and just go, I want to see them destroyed. I want to see the destruction of their life. I want to see them fall. I want to see them fail. I want to see everything bad happen to them. God's not going to be pleased with that kind of a heart, because God would end up saying to us, well, you may not like them, but do you ever think to pray for them? And so there would be a chastisement coming back on us. It's like, yeah, God would be able to say, I'm not a fan of what they're doing, and they're going to have to deal with theirs, but your heart's not right in this either. So the idea that God could look at both and have them be in a place that's completely out of balance is definitely true. So, of course, the wicked or the evil person is going to have to come to grips and going to come into a place of judgment because of their actions. The one thing we don't want to see as the believer is having a problem with God when he examines how it is that we act, because our heart should never rejoice even in the falling of the wicked. We would rather see them turn. We would rather see them come to salvation. We would say if they're never going to, then we could only pray, God, don't let them be effective at what they try to do, because they'll harm others in the process. But I don't take joy in watching them fall apart, because again, I consider their end, as we would see what Asaph says in the Psalms. I see the prospering of the wicked, and it's almost too much for me to take. And he says, but then I went into the house of the Lord, and I considered their end. They don't have what I have. They don't have this relationship with God, Asaph would say. So it kind of helps put things, if you will, into a perspective when we look at, the here and now, our relationship with the Lord, but man, down the road, in the eternal sense, it is a whole different matter. So, in verse 19, do not fret because of evildoers. And the fretting here is just, it's not just, it's a word we don't use very often. The idea of fretting is like, I'm troubled about this. This fretting that's here is, you're vexed. I mean, it's a place of burning. You're just angry. You're furious. There's a rage that's there. There's an anger. You're vexed. So he says, don't fret because of what these people, as he says here, are evildoers. Don't burn, don't be angry, don't let it get under your skin because of evildoers, nor be envious of the wicked. So the burning is like, why do they get away with it? And in the back of your mind, why don't I get away with it? The idea of also, don't be envious of the wicked. What it is that they have, what makes them who they are, don't see because they might have some kind of material benefit to it or some other kind of benefit. Certainly don't look for it for yourself, because it comes at a price. So he says in verse 20, for there will be no prospect for the evil man. There's no good outcome. There's nothing for them to look forward to. There's no hopefulness. The lamp of the wicked will be put out. And we do know in the Old Testament sense, under the law, the people that were like that, God would not let them prosper. They'd be found out. And we have example after example of these people who did wicked things that God would show it, and then they would have to deal with the consequences of it. So it's pretty much the same thing here. We should look at that for these people, just consider who they are. You don't want to be like them, because look at what the future holds for them. So it says the lamp of the wicked will be put out. Verse 21 and 22, my son, fear the Lord and the king. So the two different things. There is the Lord, our God, and then there's also the king, the person who is the ruler in this place. Now, the fear is the idea of giving due honor, due respect to the person. With God, that's never changing. We always give him what is due his name, which is always praise and honor and glory, because he's always good. The kings could be a different story. The kings could be honorable, and as Solomon would say this, he would look at the kings as assuming that they're honorable people. Think about how horrible some of the kings down the line were. Think of Ahab. Think of Manasseh. Think of those guys. Do we want to have a fear of those guys? not in the sake of due reverence. Of course not. These are horrible, wicked, just vile, vile people. So the fear of them may actually be, I'm afraid of what they might do to me. I see what they do to everyone else. God is never that way. We never look at him in the fearful way because God's never fickle. He doesn't do things just in rage. He's not evil like some of the kings would be. But in the perfect world, right? Have a due honor and a due respect for the king, for the Lord, and also for the king. And he goes on to say this, do not associate with those who are given to change. They're never content. They're not stable people. They're always going from one thing to the next. Everything's about something new, something different. This is an interesting thing because if we want to try to put it into a modern day type of a thing, I can say this from the day that I walked into Calvary Chapel, Cyprus, almost 40 years ago. It would have been, late 85. So it's not quite 40 years ago that we started going there, but it was close. It's close. It's getting close. But from the moment that we walked in there, there hasn't been a whole lot of change in what it is that I've believed. I've just learned more because time's gone by. You have more exposure to the word. You spend more time studying all the rest. But I'm not interested in changing. I don't care about the new churches. I don't care about the new things that they're doing. I don't care about the new musics, and I don't care about all that stuff. If it's wrong, yeah, I care about it because I want to expose it. But just because something new is coming into the church, I'm not interested in that. And so it is also in society with people. They're into something new all the time. Whatever's trending, whatever's cool, that's what they're doing. These are people who are unstable, and usually that just shows that they're incredibly unhappy. So he says, don't be like them. And so don't associate. Don't have any part of people that are just given to change. Whatever's going around, they're jumping on the bandwagon. For their calamity will rise suddenly. It's going to come out of nowhere. It's going to happen all of a sudden. Whatever it is that's calamity, whatever harm comes to them, it's going to happen unexpectedly. And who knows the ruin of those two that those two can bring? And what are those two? Going back, it would figure, based on the context of it, we're talking about the Lord, God himself, and the king. If not given their due reverence, and the people that are into change just want to do something different and don't want to come under the headship of those people, well, sooner or later, their actions are going to have, desperate effect on their lives, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences of it. So, he says, well, just think about the ruin that those two can bring, meaning the Lord and the king. Now, verse 23 is like almost a title that's in here. There's almost a break in what we have here. It's almost it's almost like saying probably the rest of this chapter. This is almost looks like it's an addendum or a titling that's there. There's a lot of question as to the wording that's here, but it's almost like it's a section that's highlighting what follows after, but what's been before it is really along the same line. So it's kind of a peculiar thing that's said here. These things also belong to the wise. So it says, it is not good to give partiality in judgment. Now, that's odd. It's I shouldn't say it's odd. It's something that I think any of us would be able to say, yeah, there shouldn't be, the scales of justice, as they say, they should be blind. And so this case, that there shouldn't be partiality. You shouldn't take into consideration one person against another and show favoritism towards another person. That's just common sense. It shouldn't be that way, but that's really kind of the way that it is. Higher than that, it was completely spoken against in God's word. So a number of places, you find it in Exodus, you find it, there's a reference that goes almost to this verbatim, found in Leviticus 19:10. The same thing, you don't favor the poor, you don't favor the rich, you don't favor anything, but we see even in Jesus' time when he had said about the people who get the favorable places to sit and what goes along with them, people defer to them. So the idea of playing favorites is just a human nature kind of a thing, but we're not supposed to do it. We do those things, it's just human nature, because we're usually thinking it's reciprocal, I'll get something if I do, but he says it's not what a person should do, it's not the right thing to do. So it says, it's not good to show partiality in judgment, and he who says to the wicked, you are righteous, him the people will curse. So that idea of calling somebody something that they're not, it's the total opposite. But you wouldn't say that unless there's something in it for you. So that speaks about you as much as it speaks about the person. Him the people will curse, and nations will abhor him. They'll just have disdain for him. They'll hate him. But those who rebuke the wicked will have delight, and a good blessing will come upon them. So he kind of gives that idea of reciprocal things. If you're going to never put yourself into a place of compromise to try to praise somebody for something, the idea that God would see to it that you're in whatever way rewarded, whether it's just acknowledgement and nothing else, but the person who says rightly, who makes proper judgment, then they're going to be honored for that. So it says, he who gives a right answer kisses the lips, and that the right answer, it's such a favorable thing when somebody gives what is a right, honest, godly answer. It's going to be received by the person as though it's something to be thanked and honored and kissed. So verse 27, prepare your outside work, make it fit for yourself in the field, and then afterward build your house. This again is the idea of building a house in the way of legacy. This goes more, again, if this is an older man speaking to younger men, have your things put in the proper order. Especially if a young man is going to be taking a wife, there are a lot of things that are expected. There's dowries and everything else that may very well be under consideration here. But what Solomon's getting at is have things in place. And, this is a counsel that you get from a lot of people nowadays. It's like, well, don't think about getting married until you've got the job and you've got the home, you've got money in reserve and all the rest of that. My wife and I didn't have all of that. We just knew that the Lord was involved in our lives, and we were thankful to be a part of what he was doing. It's been, coming up this year, it'll be 30. Oh my gosh, it'll be 39 years in September, and it has endured. And God has been faithful to it the whole time. But again, it's a little bit of a different world in which they lived. My wife and I didn't have two dimes to rub together for much of our early part of our lives, but we had a roof over our heads and we had all of those things. This is said, think about this being said some 3,000 years ago. And so that kind of helps us to understand a little bit more about it. A man would have to be able to support his wife and support everything. So get those things in place. Don't try to figure it out after the fact. But people would be married young at that point, and younger than a lot of times we find here. And the way of life was a little bit different, I would think, for the most part, than what we have here. But the point is, don't do something without really working it through. Make sure that everything is in its place before you start to build not only the edifice of the house, but everything that happens inside the doors, the family. It says, verse 28, do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, for would you deceive with your lips? And so the idea of you're giving false testimony about somebody who's your neighbor. And so the idea is like you'll say something that never actually took place for whatever gain it might be to you. This is a caution. Don't ever do it. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause. If you're going to say something that they've done, they better have done it. Or else what you're doing is you're lying about it. And it says, for would you want to deceive with your lips? You want to give the false impression by the testimony of your mouth? That had a lot of weight. So it's a caution, a very flowery language way of saying, don't be a liar. Verse 29, do not say, I will do to him just as he has done to me, and I will render to the man according to his work. So a couple of ways that this has been looked at. In the first part of it, do not say, I will do to him as he's done to me. Think about what Jesus had said, that whole idea of turning the other cheek, and if somebody takes something from you, give them your tunic, and all of those kind of things. It's like, don't reciprocate in kind. It's not what we are supposed to do. Now, again, we realize that in the law, there was provision for if a person murders someone else, there's a punishment meets the crime kind of a thing. But on a person-to-person level, that idea of being wronged, there's no sense in you trying to take it for yourself. So the second part of this, the first part's easy to understand, where he just says, you don't say this. I'm going to do to him as he's done to me. I'm going to repay him for what he's done. Usually you're not going to do that. You're going to go quite the extra mile. But the second part of it is where it says, I will render to the man according to his own work. That can be said by the person themselves, and you're not supposed to do that either. Whatever they did to me, whatever they produced, whatever the work that they were in their harm towards me, it's coming back on them. there might be an alluding to the idea that I won't do that. That's the Lord. It's he who is supposed to be the avenger. He's the one who is supposed to take vengeance because he's judiciously correct. He's right. He won't overreact. He'll take everything into account the right way. It does seem it's more along the lines of the person speaks both parts of this. And the caution against it is just because you've been wronged, don't retaliate in kind. Remembering on the backside of it, the Lord will do this because he's able to do it judiciously. So you could make the case for both. Verse 30. Verse 30. I went by the field of the lazy man and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was all overgrown with thorns, and all the surface was covered with nettles or weeds. Its stone wall was broken down. Now, when you read the first part of this, verse 30, when I went by the field of the lazy man and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding, what do you think that you would find? So the person who might have a possession but does nothing with it. They don't pursue it. They don't make sure that it's taken care of. They're lazy. They don't have any stake in trying to make sure that it's maintained and cared for. In this case, this would be the kind of thing where that's the man's livelihood. That earns him a living and provides for his own home, and yet he doesn't put into the whole thing. And what would you see for a lazy man? What would you see of his possession? And here's the sad thing. You can a lot of times drive past a person's house and have a pretty good idea if they fit this kind of a description. So it says, when I saw it, I considered it well. I looked at it and I received instruction. So here's the cool thing about it. Look at what verse 32 says. So when I saw it, I considered it well. What I saw with my own eyes. And this is something that I think is really good counsel. The idea that we would gaze upon something and take it in. Pay attention to what we're seeing and work through it in your mind. In this case, it's looking at what knowing a lazy man lives there by taking a look at everything that's there. Stopping for just a moment, saying, well, you can have any number of reasons why, but what's identified here, it's the lazy man that's caused the problem. It's not because there's been some hardship in the family. It's not because of any other factor other than the person that owns it has no initiative. They're lazy people. They put nothing into their ownership of things. So I considered it. And this idea of Solomon speaking as the one observing. I looked through the whole thing and it just started to kick it around in my mind. What were the conclusions that I could draw from it? Now, again, remember, he's writing this down not to belittle the person, but to say to the one who's reading this, don't be like the guy, because he doesn't name him by name. He just says, a lazy man, unidentified, whoever it was. I just looked at the condition of things and started to think through it. What would cause something like this? And again, you can have any number of reasons why something would happen, but he's given us the reason why. It's the lazy man, the one who won't lift his hand to do something, and it shows. His walls are broken down. It's filled with thorns and weeds. It looks horrible. It looks unkept. So he says, so I saw it and I considered it well, thought through this well, completely. And then I looked on it and I received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. So shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. So the end result of it, when it all comes down around you, like, you have a vineyard or whatever it is that he's got here, and all these things should be producing for him. It's not producing for him. Now he's going to have need. And the devastation that he's going to have to deal with is as though, it says in 34, it's going to come upon him like a prowler, somebody who shows up while you're asleep and they plunder everything that you have. Or worse yet, like an armed man, somebody who has a sword and a spear and you're just sitting there looking around with nothing to defend yourself. So this idea that you're going to be overcome by the circumstances of your own laziness and your own sloth. Solomon has done this quite a bit through this. Try to make sure that people understand the idea of being sedentary and not paying attention to things and not working through situations and not being careful about your the kind of effort that you put into things. Because again, if people were not working with their hands, they're not really going to be able to function very well. It's a much different society, but it's the same thing. A person that gets fired from a job or whatever the case may be and doesn't look to do anything look for handouts or look for the government or whatever else, sooner or later that stuff runs out, and then where are they? They have nothing to show for it, and it's like they're devastated. And it's like somebody has plundered everything that they have by force. So really heavy stuff, but easily observable, easy to understand. Now, something that I thought was really interesting, and especially, those of you who know me best know that I have a very keen fascination. And I don't know if I would call it fascination. I think I would probably want to just say I pay a lot of attention to the nation of Israel. One, because I love it, and I love the people. I love what God has done through it. I love the fact that they're in the land. I love all those things about it. And going there for the first time almost 10 years ago, it absolutely changed my life. It's more than 10 years ago. It changed my life absolutely. But I also realized that even if I had never been there, I understand the very, very pivotal place that they have in human history. I also realized that a nation and how it's run from the top is going to have quite an effect on the day-to-day life of people. So whoever is in charge is a big deal if there's going to be something that's different from just the status quo. So in that idea, there's a term that you're probably hearing a little bit more now. You might not have ever heard it before, but it's a philosophy that's been around for a long time, and it's referred to as the left-right paradigm, or even a false left-right paradigm. And so different people will define it a little bit differently, but I guess you can say in the big picture, in the aggregate, you can look at it like this. We talk about it, or if you listen to people that speak about politics, they talk about the left and the right. And the left-right paradigm that you hear a lot of Bible prophecy teachers talk about, it is that there are people who claim to be on the right and people who claim to be on the left, but there's really not a dime's difference between the two of them. They can talk a big game, they might say that they support one thing or another, but nothing ever changes. So this is what they call the left-right paradigm, that they just kind of stake out a particular position, but they have no real interest in seeing anything ever change. And it's why you've started to hear people over the last few years, they just refer to it as the uniparty. There's not a dime's bit of difference between the Republicans and the Democrats, the conservatives and the liberals, or the progressives, or whatever you want to call them. There's really no difference between them. You can find these outlier difference people, and maybe some people that you might have even met through the years, and you go, they are different. People that are genuinely wanting to see something different happening as far as our world is concerned and as far as the nation is concerned. Well, that's certainly something that you could make the case for it being, but is it really something that is a concerted, is it really something that's a well thought out, really well devised kind of a scheme, or is it that everybody is just so, they're just so similar in so many different things, nothing ever gets done because nobody ever wants to do anything about it? And you hear so many stories about the people who say they're going to do all these things, and they come to Washington and they're just kind of wet behind the ears, and it doesn't take long for the system to devour them, and they become just like everyone else. So again, the idea of the left-right paradigm or the uniparty, these are terms that we're starting to see thrown around quite a bit. Now, do I agree that things have just been on autopilot for decades? I totally agree with that. Is there really some conspiracy behind it, and it's a concerted effort by all parties above? They'll say one thing on the campaign trail, but never ever intend to do anything different. If that's the case, you have one of two options. It was already planned and predetermined to begin with, or they're just not able to get anything done. Even if they wanted to, they can't get anything done because they're just one person, and they just become corrupted in time, and they get settled into just doing the same old, same old. You can make the case for all of that. The one question that I would have to ask, does it have to be that way, and is it inescapable? What we're watching currently in our times will be a real good test to that. So whether you love him or whether you hate him, President Trump is an interesting character in that he's talking about doing things that nobody's ever talked about doing before. Now, the people who think it's all just a contrived thing, there's really nothing going on, it's just being done for window dressing. And they'll point to the fact that everything that he's proposing to do and all the stuff that's happening with Doge and all the rest of it, it's really coming to nothing. Well, it's all tied up in court right now, but we'll see. we'll know a year or two from now for sure if any of this stuff ever goes anywhere. But we've never had somebody who's willing to say, we're just going to stop doing the way that things have been going. And the opposition that's coming against him is really a pretty interesting thing to see. Now, whether or not we'll be able to make the case a year or 2 years down the road that there's just a uniparty and that there's only this false left-right paradigm, even the people who believe in that, even with all the stuff that's happening in the background, they will say, all of it's done, it's just window dressing, it's just a diversion, it's just getting people thinking that something might be happening, but they're all in on the same thing. And pretty much the people that are saying that in many different things, they'll always, well, I shouldn't say always, they will oftentimes take more the conspiracy side of any particular question or equation. I'm just a person that thinks, I believe that the people say there's nothing to see here. I don't agree with that. I also don't instantly default to the worst possible of all potentials, and that everything really kind of has a clandestine, conspiratorial side behind it. When I look at a guy like President Trump or anyone else around him, anyone else that's in a place of power, we got a couple of different options here. We have, to me, the options are, these are people that are just fronts, and what they're doing behind the scene is that they're just incredibly evil. They're in the particular place knowing exactly what they're doing, to the point where some will refer to them as Luciferians, or people that are, they have this eyes wide open. They know that they're doing the devil's bidding, and this is why they are there. I kind of think that there's another option too, and I tend to think that this is probably more the case than anything else. These are unregenerate people. These are unsaved people who happen to know an awful lot of stuff about an awful lot of things and have a great deal of power, and they're using it not really fully understanding what's going to come of their labor and how it can be used down the road. I tend to think more in those directions. Are there really fully evil people who know what they're doing is completely and absolutely totally wrong and evil and devastating? Absolutely. But I think, once again, I would believe that the lion's share is more on the side of things that they're just unsaved, unregenerate people who have no idea that they're being used, and their positions and all of it is being used for a much different purpose down the road than what they have intended now. Doesn't mean that they're people that should be winning the Nobel Peace Prize or anything else, but it's certainly, we can either paint them as these conspiratorial people that are just, like almost behind the scenes devil worshiping people, or just people who are unsaved doing what unsaved people do. And again, by the time that you get into those levers of power in those high positions, you have a great deal of influence and power. So unregenerate, unsaved, the people that are not born again, they're going to do what those people do. But the more power that they have, the more it's going to be seen in the day-to-day of things. But I am still watching what's happening in our world today and in our country, and I'm saying nothing's been done like this in a very, very long time. And the globalists in our world really hate what's happening here. They can't stand our president. And so there would be people that would say, yeah, well, that's all for show. Behind the scenes, they're all on the same page. Okay, I don't know how to answer that. All I can go by is what I'm seeing around us, and things are a little bit different. They are certainly different than they were in the previous 4 years in a number of different ways, and Israel's a great example of it. I was talking with a man who has family there and friends, and very, very involved. He's a Jewish man, very involved in that part of the world, and said, yeah, the way that the United States is viewed by the people of Israel now versus the last regime that we had here is night and day. That's just the people that are there. So that's a major matter when it comes to the end times and where we are as far as prophecy is concerned. Though the United States doesn't have to be directly involved in any of what we think are the wars that are going on or the scenarios that are spoken of, certainly the things that are being put in motion in the world around us were a major player in it. And what happens with Israel and our support for them has a lot to say about that. So where we are, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, we'll have a much better view whether or not this left-right paradigm is something that is completely inevitable, or if the right number of people were together and wanting to do something completely different, could the course that we've been on for decades be turned in a bit of a different direction? I don't know. It's possible, but I don't buy in lock, stock, and barrel with the idea of the left-right paradigm, and everybody in a place of power is doing exactly the same thing, and there's never going to be the potential for something different. I don't subscribe to that entirely, mainly because of this. The left-right paradigm may have trouble penetrating the DC, establishment that it is, and the power structure that's there. But a left-right paradigm does absolutely exist, because I'm watching the crazy people doing stuff to Tesla dealerships, and I know where I am on the political side of things, and on the spiritual side of things, I'm on the far right, as people would put all that stuff. And I know that there are people who are completely on the opposite end of everything that I believe, from being conservative on the things of society, and of a spiritual sense, very, very conservative on all things of doctrine and theology, against people who probably don't even believe that God exists. So the idea of extremes on both sides, they exist all around us. To think that somehow that is impossible, that it could ever penetrate Washington, just doesn't, I think, take into account that potentially a person who has the ability and has the mind to do it could absolutely change things there. Whether that's going to be the case here, we will see. Or whether everything gets settled back into the same place of normalcy, again, remains to be seen. I just want to throw it out there that I think that there's another way that this could be looked at, and time will certainly tell. So if you have any questions about anything I shared, contact me through the ministry's website, oldpaththeology.net, and I'll be happy to answer your emails if you have any questions, and look forward to be able to do that with you. And we'll be picking up at Revelation. Gosh, we get to chapter 19 this coming Thursday, and I might have a few other things that I'll do on the topical side of it along the lines of what I just shared there, because there's a lot that's taking place in our world. And whether we like it or not, the political system and the political power structure that's in our country really does move the world. And we ought to take a look at that. That's very, very important stuff that we should look at, because, again, it affects us as far as believers having to live in a country where these things are taking place. So we'll pick that up this coming Thursday, and I look forward to sharing that with you.